Okay, so one of the things I'm aware of about today, as always, is that there is this incredible wealth of experience in the room. And this is about the intersection between mental health practice and clergy and referral and diagnosis. So the first thing I want to invite you to do is to speak up as anything, comes to your mind in relation to what I'm saying. Because I don't pretend to have a corner on the market here in terms of this material. A couple of things, just by way of what the research tells us in terms of clergy and mental health practice. 40% of all people who have mental health problems go to clergy first. So what we know is that the clergy are on the front line of mental health issues, and very often the mental health issues they face are very serious. They're not the, just garden variety, but pretty serious mental health issues. I want to talk a bit about tasks of a spiritually sensitive therapist, because that's, we got a bunch of mental health practitioners in the room here, and also clergy. But if you are going to present yourself as spiritually sensitive, you need to understand the interface between psychiatry and religion, and that there's a big historical connection between those two disciplines. And also be able to understand the use of religious language. You need to be able to assess a person's use of religion. How are they using it? Or how are they abusing it? And at times to be able to adopt the person's use of their language. Not in a disingenuous way, but in a way that lets them know that you are in some way conversant with talk about God or faith or spirituality. So, in terms of what a client ought to be able to expect from a spiritually sensitive therapist, some theological background which does not require a divinity degree, nor understanding in depth of world religions, but some sense of theology so that you get it about where the person might be coming from. Clinical competence, and the client ought to be able to expect that you do not view religion negatively. One of the reasons for the pastoral counseling movement is to counter the notion that religion equals pathology, or the notion that spirituality is really a sign of emotional weakness and an inability to function well in the world on your own. So that you come into the clinical room with an attitude that says, I appreciate religion and spirituality and its important place in the developmental life of people. We also need an ability to assess immature spirituality. So there are, as you know, healthy and unhealthy religious values, and up here there's just a list of the ways in which you can think about how religion may be used in an unhealthy way. For example, if all of the religious prescriptions are external, this is something I am required to do because God expects it, my church demands it, because it's part of the dogma, because it's part of the doctrine. Unless those beliefs, practices, and values are actually internalized, then it becomes a kind of immature use of religion. Perfectionistic religious practice, otherwise known as obsessive-compulsive disorder, is another indicator of immature religion, as well as the narcissism that so often comes with religion. More on that later. Aggression, dependence, or a kind of hyper-spirituality. Those are some of the indicators of a lack of maturity. Sometimes pastoral workers, clergy, people in churches get into difficulties around mental health issues. And here are some of the problems that can occur. The clergy person fails to pay attention to the secular need of the person. What do I mean by the secular need? Food, housing, clothing, shelter, having a job, having a social network, having friends, having a partner. These are like human needs, and so if you think that theological language will be useful in covering over the human needs, it probably won't. Another way that clergy sometimes have difficulty in the mental health arena is not having a structured plan for a person in crisis. As I said before, it's the very seriously mental ill that often arrive at the clergy person's doorstep. And so it doesn't mean that you do treatment with them. As a matter of fact, if you do treatment with them, you'll get sued. But it means that you have to have some kind of plan. And the first step in any plan is safety. So that you have to ensure that the person has a degree of safety. And beyond that, you need to empower the person. What does that mean? It means never doing for someone what they can do for themselves. Usually that is just a demonstration of narcissism on the part of the mental health worker or the clergy person. When you are doing something for them that they can do for themselves, is displaying your own power without empowering the person in need of help. So that's a very kind of fine-tuned level of assessment about when do they absolutely need your intervention and when do they just need you to suggest to them the next step, or maybe even the next 2 steps. It's never a good idea to argue an issue theologically, even though that may be your training and you'd love to display it. It is generally not a good idea, as well as explaining to anyone why a trauma occurred. Now, these things that I'm saying might seem absolutely self-evident to you, and I understand, and I don't mean to suggest that you wouldn't know them, but it is remarkable sometimes, some of the things people say. It's best not to pray with someone who doesn't want to pray with you, and it's very good not to try to convert people. These things we know. Now, in terms of trying to differentiate some of the clinical signs that you'll see, there's a difference between major depression and a grief reaction, and they may look the same. Generally speaking, you don't medicate grief. Generally speaking, you let it run its course, and you allow people to have their grief. Major depression is a serious mental illness that compromises people's ability to function in the world and to be productive, and medication, depending on the circumstances of the major depression, is often useful. So it has everything to do in terms of trying to differentiate what's going on, as well as a brief psychotic reaction and intrusive ideation. Intrusive ideation simply meaning that thoughts come in at you. You're not willing them, you're not wanting them, but they come in. Dissociation versus intrusive ideation. Dissociation is on a continuum, as is any symptom, mild, moderate to severe. Dissociation means cutting off from the current reality in order to cope and protect myself from the level of anxiety that I'm feeling. So that dissociation, in its most extreme form, is dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder. In a mild form, dissociation is simply a trance state, which some of you are in right now. The trance state is just, you kind of zone out. You look attentive. It looks as if you're here. You can even look, yes, you're laughing because you recognize the truth of this. You can be thinking about what to have for dinner tonight. You can be thinking about all kinds of things. And you can be in a trance state when you're driving. Have you ever had the experience of driving 20 miles on a road that's straight ahead and saying, how'd I get here? And what happened to that 20 minutes? You were in a trance state, and fortunately you got through it. So this is called dissociation. Failure to detect suicidal or homicidal cues is a serious difficulty. One of the things we need to know about suicide is that most people talk about it. It is the rare individual who commits suicide who takes their own life without speaking about it. People sometimes feel that it is unwise to ask about it because if you ask about it, you're going to prompt it, and that's false. If you ask about it, you may indeed find that a person is enormously relieved to find out that somebody actually got it. Remember that symptoms are designed to communicate something. Symptoms are designed to communicate. They are a form of communication. So if I'm in a suicidal place and in a deep depression, at some level I may be hoping that you get it, that you pick it up, and that you even ask. The failure to refer for therapy is another significant issue, and something that clergy need to pay attention to is when to refer. When are the symptoms such that it's time to refer?